Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to speak with me. I enjoyed watching the film. I was really surprised by a lot of it. So I have a lot of questions for you. But my first question is about the process of getting this film made from conception idea to release. How long was that process and what's it been like for both of you? And at what point did Roger come on as producer?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll start with a bit and then you take over. But basically, I wrote the film, I think in 2020, during lockdown, and I'd written another film that I had budgeted and realized that was going to cost millions of dollars to make. And I thought, no, I really just got to do something because I don't know what the world's going to be like coming out of lockdown. So I'm going to make something that I can literally do in my own back garden, which in the end, I did do some of it in my back garden. But
seriously,
that was more like a metaphor than anything. But so I wrote a film that I felt was a kind of interesting story that I could get excited about, that was also a kind of contained story and would exist in this kind of slightly strange, almost dreamlike world that was in the past, but also was maybe seen from this character's point of view who had these kind of had kind of been through things in the past and was kind of seeing everything through a kind of filter where he wasn't quite 100% had a grip on reality and was maybe making the wrong decisions about things. But also I wanted to be in this kind of dark Gothic, not exactly a Hammer horror world, but a kind of world of kind of mossy cemeteries and coffins and stuff, and be in that world, but not in a fantasy version of that world, in a kind of reality version of that world. I guess.
I didn't get that one, but I see where you're coming from now.
There's a little bit of Hammer in there, but anything with gravestones, I think Hammer House of Horror.
Yeah.
But and then so I'd written the script, and I kind of wrote the script really quite quickly. Probably took a month or something, and then kind of stood back and thought, okay, well, I think I can do this, and started this journey of trying to find a way of putting together the finance for the film. And I'd already worked with Roger on a short film, and we'd stayed in touch, and we worked on a short film in 2006, which was actually set in outer space. And we'd stayed in touch after that, and I said, hey, Roger,
I thought you were crazy.
I think you'd be great.
And I'm crazy, so we kind of got on.
I think you'd be great to play Finlay.
Yeah.
And you went away and said, wow,
I couldn't believe it.
You were very keen to do it, which was amazing. And in a sense, while I was writing the script, it was kind of in my mind to try and get Paul McGann for the role. I just felt he would be right for it, and I thought he would be somebody we could maybe get to, and and it might be something
I can.
Yeah.
Because I knew Nick, the guy who plays the priest, Nick Rowe, who's the young Sherlock Holmes way back in the day.
Yeah.
You remember? Okay, so we got so many actors who've been in cult movies. It's ridiculous.
Check.
We've just we didn't know what we were doing, and then we realized we've got every actor who's been in some kind of cult movie at some stage. So I said to Nick, first off, Nick, would you want to be in a film? He went, yeah. And then I said, can you get the script to Paul? And he said, yeah, because he knew Paul from back in the day when he was young Sherlock. And he said he lives in Bristol. I said, well, that's where we're going to film it. So he got the script to Paul, and Paul read it, and then you met you, and the rest is history.
Yes. So I had a first meeting with Paul. Kind of he'd read the script, and we were going to kind of meet up and talk for an hour about what my approach was going to be, and we ended up being in that meeting for 4 hours or
talking
something.
About silent movies.
We talked about
Paul's into silent movies.
We talked about silent movies. We talked about all kinds of stuff that was we talked a little bit about the character in the film, but we kind of went off piste and was in this whole kind of world of kind of interesting Gothic stuff and kind of all sorts of different interests we shared.
Yeah, he's from the north. He's from the same part of the world in the UK we're all from. We live within 60 miles, all born within about 35 miles of each other.
Yeah, it sounds very meant to be.
Yeah. Well, it kind of was, and then we realized. So I managed to get. Can I say something?
Well, I thought it might be time for another question.
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
So, the film deals with themes of power, corruption, and also resistance. How do you feel these themes resonate with that post-World War I setting, which is a period that's often associated with disillusionment and societal upheaval, and even like as the world is right now, it feels like that. How do you
Wow.
think that
That's
all
interesting.
kind of tied in?
Okay.
That's lovely. That's a lovely.
Ooh,
That's a
yeah,
lovely,
that's an interesting
that's
question.
a very interesting question.
I guess what and I talked about this with Paul when we were doing the film is I think Arthur's kind of trapped, like almost like he's kind of got stuck in it in his own, you know, world that's maybe 20 years behind the period that the film's set in. So the film's probably set around 1960, 1961, roughly. We don't really say because there's not that sort of level of reality to the film. We don't have any specifics in terms of, you know, what the date is or where we really are. It's all a kind of little bit of a mystery. But I think the events that happened to uh, uh, Arthur, Paul's character, kind of post World War II, and you know, the death of this love of his life has kind of left him kind of just on hold, really, in his life. And I think to him, he's kind of so, you know, the kind of grief and the depression is so kind of foggy for him that he's not in a great position to make the right decision about this offer that Finlay, the gangster, makes to him. And yes, he makes the wrong decision, but I think he makes the wrong decision for the right reasons. He wants to kind of escape. He wants to get money and get out of there. And also, if Finlay asks you to do something, you're probably going to do it, you know. And he kind of hopes, I think, like a lot of people, when they end up in a stressful or a emotional situation like that of grief or depression or whatever, I think he's kind of putting his hands over his ears and kind of hoping it'll just be okay and it'll just go away. But the fact is, in the story, it's not just one or two bodies. It's not, you know, it's not a thing that nobody will notice. It becomes more and more. The dial gets turned up and he kind of has to face up to the choices he's made, I guess.
And also the world, just very quickly, the world that it was set in is we know that world ish. We weren't born at that time, but not long after, 20 years after, we're in a world where we come from, on Sunday back in the day, the whole world stops in that place. Nothing happens. And you can never leave because you've not got the qualifications. Or in Tara's character's situation, she's incredibly bright, but she's completely dominated by the men who she's surrounded by, and they're dominated by their power and their corruption. And it was interesting, our production accountant, who comes from the former Soviet Union, said, when can my mum and dad see this? Because it resonates with them about being in their time in a world that you're trapped in. Which was, you didn't make it with that, but it was
not at all. But I think
moving.
What she responded to is the idea about this person having this kind of ironclad grip on a small town and having, you know, like you know, using corruption and using physical force to maintain power in this small fiefdom was just something that resonated with her, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think corruption in any era and any time is something that resonates with people and they can deeply, you know, feel it. Now, Roger's character, Finlay, his brutality is also like a key element. How did you work it out so that those moments conveyed his power and the fear he instills, but without being gratuitous?
So when Mike came to me with it, I do a lot of bad guys. I don't know why, but for some reason, I'm not bad in real life, I hope. But I do a lot of bad guys. And so I felt with Finlay, his power was in the fact, as we were talking about this earlier on, the lovely Robert Whitelock, who is my sort of henchman. I don't know if he is such a wonderful actor and so scary. And he just literally turns on camera. You know, he's so scary that Finlay doesn't need to get his hands dirty, which a lot of very clever gangsters don't, or criminals don't. They rely on other people to do it for them. And he relies so much. So as a consequence, he can kind of be a bit charming and nice and laid back because he just has people power is actually quite one of those things which you don't need to exert. It just exudes from you. And when you have people like his henchmen who love causing violence, you've got that kind of power, that immediate power behind you. So it's Finley's job is really just Finley's hang up is Tara's character. He's obsessed with her, and it's this gilded cage. He wants to put her in the gilded cage. Power. He can't let her go ever. And it's cruel and brutal. It's like that's his I think that's what comes across. That's his brutality, I think, for me.
I think also he does have some violent moments like later in the film, and but that's not his comfort zone necessarily. I think he exerts his power in other ways, and I think he's more likely to kind of, you know, beat you around the head with his kind of rhetoric and his conversation, because he has these quite long speeches which are kind of, you don't know which way he's going to go. They seem quite charming, they seem a little bit funny, but they're also kind of quite strange. And I think if you were in a meeting or in a situation with Finlay, you'd be really scared about, am I going to say the right thing here or not, because it could go any way.
And that's, you see that with all those the movies like the Goodfellas and stuff. They dress beautifully, they look amazing, but there's just that underlying sense that at any stage, if you said the wrong thing, they would make sure that you would not do it again.
Yeah, and I think there's also something that you pity in that character as well, because he has to trap people. He's killed his best friend. He's done all these things that are just kind of like brutal, but he has to do them because otherwise who would stay, right?
Like, yeah, I think so. I think exactly. He kind of doesn't know, he's compulsive about power and he's compulsive about killing, and he doesn't necessarily think about the consequences of that. And he's, you know, most of the characters in the film are kind of in, you know, they're shut indoors or they're in cages or, you know, prisons of their own making. And in a way, Finlay's in his own prison, which is like he's created this power, but there's no purpose to it.
But if you look at America, for instance, you look at the mafia, you look at all of the gangsters of the 30s, eventually they can get so far, but at some stage their hubris or their ego or their pathology will be their undoing, because they can't stop. Its power corrupts absolutely.
Because we also, in context of Finlay, we talked about Roman emperors a bit, and how that's kind of like, you know, he's like a kind of Nero with his, you know.
I mean, I don't think there's any reference in the modern day, though, really.
Speaking of like these influences, were there any specific cinematic influences or other films that inspired the visual approach to The Undertaker?
Yes, so I kind of, in a way, influenced by, you know, generally a little bit by silent movies, but also movies like, you know, early Kurosawa movies that managed to kind of tell these crime genre stories, but also be really very stylish with it, but also quite simple as well. So I was looking for that mix of like something that was quite a simple setting and a simple story, but would also have style to it, but also be a kind of genre film as well. And I think also like there's a Finnish director called Aki Kaurismäki who does these, you know, he particularly deals with like crime stories quite well. And there's these quite intensive, you know, conflicts going on. But some of the scenes are kind of, you know, traditionally for a movie, they're quite long scenes, but they do actually kind of pile on the pressure in terms of how it works with the characters.
And also it's a film noir, you know, there's a film noir quality. And there is also that 1960s, 1950s, 60s British quality about it. It has all of those sort of, there's a kitchen. So the thing, so you're probably going to ask this question anyway, but Murray Melvin, who we are no longer with us, God rest his soul, he was just his last movie. And we were talking earlier that just to get someone like Murray Melvin, who was in Barry Lyndon, he was in Kubrick's, he worked with Kubrick, he was in The Devils, he worked with
Taste of Honey.
Taste of Honey. I mean, we just sat at the lunch table and just talked to him because the guy's an icon. And when you get somebody like that agreeing to do your movie, it's so humbling, but also so informative about who he was as a person. I mean, he worked with everybody. and then you get McGann, and then you get Fitzgerald, and then you get Nick Rowe, and then you get Sean Gilder, and you're like, this is getting ridiculous.
It's kind of was in a sense, like every day when we were shooting, I was looking at the monitor and thinking this whole thing is like this way better than I could never even imagine what it's going to be like. You know, it's kind of like you write something, you think, well, I hope we can make this film, but you don't think it's going to have that quality in terms of the role. And you certainly don't think you write a role and then someone like Murray Melvin's going to do it.
Well, I've forgotten how terrifying the film was to make as a producer, because it's my first time producing. It was we shot it in 23 days.
Wow. That's amazing. And, you know, you talked about it being like a simple story and everything. There was something that was really simple that really struck me, and it was the use of doors, the unclosed doors, they're flapping, the squeaking.
Well done.
They really conveyed like Arthur's stress and anxiety to me. And I was like, close the door. I'm so stressed out right now.
You got it. You got it.
I think basically
nobody else has said
Arthur's, you know, obviously it's a metaphor. Arthur's obsessed with shutting doors because he doesn't want to, you know, his Undertaker shop, the front of the shop, there's the Chapel of Rest and there's the office, and they're the places that kind of open to the world and people can come and visit and be in those. Then he has these private areas behind that. He has his office and the mortuary and things like that. And he's obsessed with closing the doors. It's almost like that's the two parts of his brain. It's the part of his brain that, you know, accepts reality and the part of his brain that denies reality. So you can kind of think two things at the same time if that's going on, two opposite things at the same time. And he's obviously very keen to keep the doors closed. You know, he's obsessive about it. But if you notice when his let's say the spirit of his dead brother Gordon comes back, Gordon just opens all the doors. So really, but then when the doors are banging, Gordon
asleep.
The doors move. It's not the wind. Gordon starts to try and communicate with him, but I think it's an effort for Gordon to come back and communicate with him from where he is, from his world.
Wait till you see our next movie.
And Gordon makes his supreme effort to actually try and communicate, but actually fails because Arthur doesn't really know what he's talking about.
Well,
but it's Gordon that's flapping all the doors to say, hey man, you're doing the wrong thing. Get your stuff together, you know?
Yeah, and I think it was a clever way to also illustrate the idea that Arthur's like traversing two worlds, right? The living and the dead, and he's bridging this. So I was really fascinated by that use. I thought it was really great.
You got it. Because you're literally the first person who's actually said that.
And actually, you know, it's interesting when we were shooting, there was like, sure, we had, I think some of those doors moving they were in the script and the scenes where, you know, Paul's character gets up and closes the door and he talks about the doors. But when we were shooting, we were kind of moving around the set and I'd go, oh, let's just shoot this door going like this. And I think the crew are a bit like, what, we're filming another door?
Mike, I've worked with you before. You do some crazy ass shit and everyone's looking at you going, why is he doing that? And then eventually you got to go, I'm just got an idea. And we all just go, fine.
So it was great. It really stressed me out.
Every door we could find in that set, we shot it moving a little bit and tried to get some door action in there.
I definitely think that it worked. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but I have a lot of questions. I'm going to sneak in a couple more.
We're in Temple of Geek here.
Yeah, let's geek it out.
So one of the things that I want to know, can you elaborate on the creative process of crafting the narrative arc for Arthur, who seems to be like an unwilling participant to this, to then suddenly becoming like an active resistor?
Wow.
Oh, okay. So I think, so obviously Arthur does this, deal with the devil, if you want to call it that. He does this, he takes this Faustian pact on board because Arthur, early on in the film, Arthur kind of feels that, well, if I can just get some money, I can retire and go to the island. And he kind of feels that he can spiritually be with Fiorella if he goes there. He later realizes and admits that, well, I could go there and she's not going to be there. She's gone. She's dead. But that's part of his kind of awakening to those facts. But early on in the film, he thinks, well, if I can just get some money, I retire, get the hell out of here, okay, so I'll take this deal. Maybe nobody will know that I've buried a few extra bodies, maybe I'll try and get away with it. So he's only doing things that he sees it as like, okay, this is a little bit wrong or a little bit sin, and in a way you can't be a little bit wrong. You're either right or you're wrong. You can't be a little bit wrong.
Interesting.
You can't sin a little bit. I don't think you kind of either sin or you don't sin. So I think then he's obviously the machinery of Finlay, the way Finlay wants to gain power and things, that gets out of control. Arthur realizes that once people like Pullman, the accountant, are dead, and
Tara's dead.
Tara's character, Vic, is dead, that things have really got out of control now. And what he does then is he tries to run away, but is unable to run away. So he reaches the point where he thinks, I've just got to face this. I've got to somehow. He thinks that Gordon wants him to take revenge for him and for the other people who've died. So he heads off on this kind of revenge mission, like the world's worst Travis Bickle, but then realizes that this isn't going to fix anything. So it's kind of he kind of, in a sense, without plot spoiling or revealing too much, I think my feeling is that he gets to where he wants to be in the end, but it's not through. That's not necessarily a positive process, but he does get there. I think he's reunited with Fiorella, and wherever he's going or whatever's happening to him, he is happy at that moment. So I think he finds it kind of happiness.
Yeah. And I think you can also see it in the fact that he chose the white suit. His coffin is white, but has the blue representing the sea that he dreamed about and everything. And so I think you can really feel that in the choices that Arthur was making towards the end. Like, okay, I'm not getting out of this, but this has to stop. Even if
you got everything.
Exactly that.
You got all the stuff.
I really enjoyed it. I just like I said, I have a lot of questions.
Keep going. We're here.
So beyond the central conflict, were there other subplots or character relationships that you found particularly interesting in exploring when you were writing the script?
I think the Bob Cryer, who plays Pullman, who's the, if you like, the crooked accountant. So he's kind of counting all the money for Finlay and paying out, and so he starts the movie as kind of his loyal supporter, his right hand man, and he kind of start, as the film progresses, his character arc is as a sort of secondary character, as a sort of backstory almost. He starts to doubt this crazy thing that's happening. He feels it's going too far, and he makes his own efforts to rectify the situation. So his character is kind of interesting, and Bob plays it beautifully in terms of just kind of thinking, this has really gone too far, and I'm going to go and talk to him. But of course, it doesn't do him any good. He ends up in a body bag like so many other people in the film. But I think also one character that was really kind of an anchor for the whole piece was Kat, who's the mortuary assistant who comes to work for Arthur, and she's kind of very no nonsense. She tells it like it is, and she's willing to do the work, and she's actually very good at doing the work. He's impressed with how she takes to the job of dealing with this.
She makes the right moral judgment.
She kind of doesn't mess around. There's no gray lines with her. There's no gray area in between. She basically, once she knows that what he's doing, she's like, this is wrong. You shouldn't be doing it. I'm out. So she's very clear. She's, in terms of her moral compass works. And many other people in the film, their moral compass isn't really working that well. I think the cop's moral compass works fine, but he's kind of
paid. It's his job.
Well, he's fighting a losing battle because even the police are corrupt in the town, and he doesn't know who he can trust. But he finds a way to achieve his goal.
Yeah, it's interesting with Sean's character. He tops and tails the movie, and it's kind of, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
And then my last question for you guys is, what do you hope audiences take away with them after watching the film?
Goodness me, that's a big one, Mike.
You know what? And this maybe doesn't sound that positive. My feeling, I've seen the film so many times now, I don't quite get this feeling, but the first few times I saw it in cinemas with an audience, is you certainly get the sense that they are very, I don't think tense is the word, but they're very like, they really don't know what's going to happen next. They don't quite know how this is going to play out. So there is a kind of tension because of that. But the other thing I always feel, or certainly when I first saw the film in cinemas, my feeling was that the film's really quite claustrophobic. And as soon as it's over, you're like, oh, I can breathe again.
Yeah.
Now, that's not a positive thing to, oh, I can breathe again is maybe not a very positive thing to leave a cinema with or a viewing experience. But I think that idea of like, nobody else in the film can get out, but the viewer can get out at the end. After 90 minutes, you can escape this. And it is quite an intense place to be and quite claustrophobic, I think.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I think it is, in the bigger world, I think it has, it doesn't, I don't think you set out to make a moral judgment on life, but I think what it does is when you leave the movie, you kind of think to yourself, wow, that was a scary time, and I don't really want to, we don't need to live in a place like that.
No,
I'm glad we don't live in a place like that.
Yeah.
We hope.
Yeah. I think the film throws into doubt the
What did you get out of it, Mike? What did you get out of it?
So what I got out of it was that resistance is the key to getting out.
Right.
And that even though it's scary and wrong, that resistance is the way to, stop corruption.
That's a great, that is a lovely, I'm so glad you got that.
Yeah. It's great.
It's so lovely.
Yeah.
What a lovely note to end on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you guys so much for speaking with me
Thank
today.
you so
I
much
really
today.
appreciate it.
In the midst of life, we are in death. To whom can we turn to for succor but to you, Lord, who are justly angered by our sins?
Finlay Unsworth came into the shop.
My business partner, mate. Had a terrible accident.
People just don't die when Finlay Unsworth's around.
I can handle him.
Deliver us from the bitter pain of eternal death.
I don't know you were back.
We all think we can get out. I've got some loose ends that need tying up. I mean, I'd call it good business.
8 feet down.
They're happy to pay, of course. When can you start?
When do you want me to start, Mr. Morel?
You've got dead bodies on your hands. Where are you going to go?
Call them London people that you know. And call our Undertaker.
You're going to be able to handle this. That's what I do.
What are you doing?
I've always known he killed him, but what can I do?
What can you do?
I just bury people.
This club's like being stuck in an asylum with mirror balls.
I've seen enough doctors in my time to know when they're looking at dead people.
Who's going to be burying you?